Hello and welcome to this week's AfterMaths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. With me, Jon Cripwell.
And me, Becky Brown.
How are you, Becky?
I'm tired, Jon. It's been a long term, hasn't it? I had my last day in school on Monday.
It has been a long term. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think this episode will be going out on Friday when most people will have finished. Well, probably all teachers will have finished. But I was just reflecting, thinking of my own children and how hard it is to get them up each morning, how increasingly hard it is as the week has gone on. Yeah, it's such a long term. And you think back, September seems like a very long time ago. And all the really hard work that happens in school in September and at the start of a term. And then you have a tiny little half term of a week, don't really recover, and then back for another huge half term with Christmas at the end of it. So well done to anybody that's listening that's got there. Finally arrived at the Christmas holidays.
And Christmas is not a relaxing time in schools, is it? It's a lovely time. It's a really nice time. There's lots of nice things going on, lots of Christmas jumpers and tinsel and parties and carol concerts and shows and nativities. I'm exhausted just thinking about it all. There's just so much going on, isn't there? And it's all lovely, and it's all the things that children will remember for years and years and years to come.
Yeah.
And all the things that families like to get involved in. And I always feel like the school is a real community hub at sort of this time of the year. People really come together around school, don't they? But when you're in the middle of that as a teacher or a leader, it just feels never ending, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A little bit of a whirlwind.
The Christmas concert at the boys' school, which was lovely last night. And it is lovely. As a parent, it's lovely to attend these things, but you do look around and think, oh, these teachers look tired.
Yes. Yeah.
And the children, too. They're definitely ready for the holidays now.
And those Key Stage 1 and reception teachers that are acting out the entire performance at the back of the hall or at the front of the hall, depending on the age of the children. My hat's off to them as well. All their singing and dancing and remembering all the moves while stood on a chair and trying to, manage behaviour. It's an incredible feat of human skill, I think.
It is, yeah.
So, yeah, well done to all of those too. But the end is nigh in the nicest possible way. We're nearly there. Hopefully, when this goes out on Friday, this will be the last day. If you're listening to this driving into school or driving home from school, you are pretty much there. So well done, everybody. Another term done, another Christmas done. Give yourself a pat on the back. And look forward to a lovely couple of weeks, which is also exhausting, actually, Becky, isn't it, when you think about it? Because you're driving all over the country potentially and trying to, see as many people as you can in that 2-week window. I always think got past kind of Boxing Day, things just calm down a little bit, don't they?
You can breathe a bit then, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the show, Becky, I thought, just to wrap up the school term, I would talk about one of my favourite things to teach, but also I think one of the things that I least understood when I was at school, which was fractions and why they can be such a sticking point for so many people. We'll talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, and we'll also have our usual takeaways from this week's interview episode with Mike Gardiner, which was all about oracy.
And finally, you may have noticed in the news last week that some schools, secondary schools, it seems at the moment, are looking at AI, particularly in maths, it seems, as a way of supplementing a teacher shortage in maths lessons. So we'll have a little chat about what we think about AI potentially encroaching into teaching itself, because we know it's been very useful to lots of teachers in lots of ways, and I make use of it in various ways to support me in my role. But in terms of actually teaching children, that seems like a whole different ballgame. So I'll be interested to hear what you think about that, Becky, as well. Just a quick reminder, you can get in touch with the show if you want to share your opinions on anything like this by emailing primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk or leaving us a comment or a DM on pretty much any of the social media platforms. And just a little request as well. If you've been listening to the show, if you listen to it regularly, if you dip in and out, if you enjoy an episode or you enjoy the show, if you could just leave us a quick review, just a comment, or a star rating on whatever platform you're listening on, it would mean absolutely everything to us, because they're tricky to come by, but we really appreciate them when they appear. So please do just take a moment to leave us a very quick review, and we really appreciate that. We'll be your friends forever.
Yeah,
So
definitely appreciated.
yeah, while we're at it, next week on next week's, it's something happening next week. Becky, what's
Oh,
going on
yeah,
next week?
something big. I feel like something we're all looking forward to.
That's right. So, given that it is the school holidays in England, we won't be having our usual interview episodes. We don't tend to do those during the school holidays, but we will be here for a festive primary maths podcast edition. And we would love any of your festive maths of life that you spot on the run up to the big day. We've had a couple of emails and comments about this already, but we would love to include as many of them as possible. So just again, primary maths podcast at twinkle.co.uk if you have got any of those that you would like to share. We will read them out on the podcast next week. And I think that episode will go out next Tuesday, which is Christmas Eve. Is that right?
Yeah, affectionately known as Christmas Adam in our household.
Very nice. I really, really, really need to do some Christmas shopping. Okay, so fractions, Becky. This came up because I was working with some lovely SCITT students yesterday, and we had a whole day on fractions. And I as I was saying to another guest earlier, that I recorded a brilliant interview this morning with a guest that I'm really excited to share after Christmas. So make sure you come back and listen then. But as I was saying to them this morning, I distinctly remember, I don't remember a lot about my maths GCSE exams. I think I just banished those to the back of my mind somewhere. But I remember looking at a fractions problem on my GCSE paper and thinking, I don't know what this means. I think I need to do the same to the top as I do to the bottom. And that was about it. That was about the limit of my conceptual understanding. I don't think when I left secondary school, I really properly really understood what a fraction was. You know, what 2/5 of something was. Um, so I was pondering this with the students yesterday,
Mm.
and sort of thinking, why is it that it's so tricky and so complicated? How do you find fractions, Becky? Were you okay with those?
Yeah, I love fractions and I love teaching fractions. And I think I mean, they get a very bad press, don't they? I think the thing that most parents will say in parents' evening when they're talking about a negative experience with maths will either be fractions or algebra, something else which
Yeah,
I love teaching.
yeah.
And really, there are just a very finite amount of rules that you need to understand. However, if you don't understand them, the whole lot can not make any sense at all. So I totally get why it's so tricky.
Well, it's really interesting doing a skit session, because the way and skit, by the way, school centered initial teacher training for anybody who's less familiar with that. One of the many, many, many acronyms in education. One of the nice things about doing those sessions is that you sort of look at a topic all the way from preschool all the way through to the end of key stage 2 and a little bit into key stage 3 to think about where it might go next. Um, and obviously with fractions, it sort of starts in reception when we think about sharing and parts of a whole. You know, you don't necessarily refer to them as fractions. We certainly don't use fractional notation at that point, but that, you know, it's there, isn't it? And we think about sharing and giving halves and halving and doubling and those sorts of things. But I would say that the place where you really get into fractions properly is in lower key stage 2, isn't it? We deal with
Yeah.
halves and quarters and three quarters in key stage 1, but really it's key stage 2 where it really ramps up a little bit, and that understanding is important. And so I was thinking about this. I was just thinking for the first sort of 7 years of life, we're generally dealing with whole numbers, aren't we? Integers, and we learn how those things work, and we learn what makes three three, and all the features of three, and what makes five five, and all the features of five. We know that a quantity of five is greater than a quantity of three. That's sort of intuitive, and then we see it and we experience it, and we count up in those numbers as well. And then all of a sudden, we're introduced to this new system which are not integers and which are much harder to represent in a meaningful, concrete way, I would suggest. We can obviously halve apples and, pizzas, and obviously my favourites, the caterpillar cakes, which I love to use as a physical bar model representation. So you can do it, but it just feels sort of harder. And I was wondering what makes it harder. One of the things I think is that you really have to have a grasp in most cases on what the whole is
Yeah.
before you can work out what the fraction means. So, and again, the whole can be a whole cake, but it could be a class made up of 30 children, or it could be a bus made up of 18 people or whatever. And so that it keeps changing, doesn't it? And a fifth
Yeah.
of one thing is not the same as a fifth of another thing.
Yeah. I don't think it's helped by the fact we use language around fractions far before we understand what they are. We talk about halves all the time, don't we? When
Yeah.
you're having half each of something, and it's not probably a mathematical half, but so that language is really
No, as
familiar
we
and
know,
used a lot.
the half of the pizza that I get is always a little larger than the half of the pizza that my children get. So
Yeah, so I don't think that
yeah,
helps.
it doesn't help, does it? I'm installing some misconceptions there at dinner time, but that's my prerogative. So I think that's part of it, and then there's also the system of it. So children will know that if you've got two equally sized cakes, and that's important. If I cut one of them up into three pieces, equal pieces, and the other one up into five equal pieces, they know that if they like cake, they're better off having one of the three pieces because those pieces are going to be larger. I think they can see that, and I think they instinctively sort of understand that. But if you
Yeah.
write down 1/3 and 1/5, everything that they've learnt up until that point tells them that the fifth should be larger because five is greater than three. And so the denominator of 5 looks greater than the denominator of 3. So it's a real change in how we think about those digits and those numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's hard, isn't it? Like you say, you've spent many, many years looking at numbers and thinking about what makes a number bigger than another, and then suddenly the rules change a little bit. And of course, they don't actually change, but they do
No.
in the way that we see it written down, definitely in the
I, I, I
abstract.
I think again it comes back to that understanding what the number means, doesn't it? And how critical that is. And we were talking yesterday about just the order that we write a fraction down can have an impact on that understanding. So, if, for example, I'm writing a fifth, I can say that the whole has been divided, and at that point, I might draw the line of division into five equal pieces, and then you can write in the five. So, write in the denominator first. And I've got two of those pieces, and write in the two to represent the numerator and the 2/5. And just a small tweak to how you actually write the fraction down as you are modeling your thinking about it, which I know would please our guest this week, Mike Gardner. We'll come back to him shortly. But as you're expressing your thinking about it, the way that you write the notation down can have an impact on children's understanding of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you're right, John. I think the way you've explained it is a beautiful way of explaining 2/5. But if you did it the other way around and didn't even think about the fraction line at first, and you're writing a 2, you're automatically thinking about it as a whole number, aren't you, rather
Yeah.
than a numerator?
Yeah, I think so. And again, this isn't necessarily for all the children in the class, is it? Some of the children will be absolutely fine. You just write down 2/5 and they will know what 2/5 means. They can visualize it, they can see it. But for some children, it really is a barrier. And then as you move into calculating with fractions, this is where those little tropes of you do the same to the top as you do to the bottom can get in the way a little bit, can't they, of actually what we're doing. And I think we just need to be careful with teaching procedures. As ever, procedures can be helpful, algorithms can be helpful, but um, if we just teach it procedurally, I think there's a real issue with that because, again, working with the students yesterday, we had I'm going to stick with fifths. 1/5 times 3. What does that mean? Well, one of the students said, "Okay, yeah, we've done this at school. So we turn the 3 into 3/1, and then I can multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator." Which is absolutely right, isn't it? You know, that does work as a a, a method, but I think it sort of hides actually what's happening when we're
Yeah.
multiplying by 3, because actually multiplying with fractions is exactly the same as multiplying with an integer. If you are multiplying a fraction by an integer, I should say, multiplying a fraction by a whole number, it's exactly the same. You know, it's repeated addition. I've got 3 lots of 1/5. And so it's much easier if you understand that. I think it's much easier to know what to do, just to say, okay, well, they're still fifths. They've not changed into anything else. I've not mutated them into anything else. They're still fifths. I've just got 3 of them. So I've got 3/5. And I don't need to write down anything to really do that. I can just instinctively know it.
Yeah, I think sometimes learning something procedurally and not really understanding the concept can actually complicate it much more because yes,
Yeah.
you might still get to the right answer, but you haven't chosen an effective way to do that or really shown that you've understood it. So yes, I think both of those ways would work perfectly well, but understanding that multiplication is repeated addition and regardless of what you're using is really key there, isn't it? In understanding what you're
Yeah,
doing.
I just think sometimes with fractions, we are at the risk of making it more complicated than it really is and making it seem
Yeah.
like this mysterious thing, when actually it still obeys all the laws and principles of normal procedures, normal maths. And even when you're multiplying a fraction by a fraction, if we just think of what that really means, a quarter times a half, to keep it simple, we're looking for a quarter of a half. It's as simple as that. So if you think about drawing a half and splitting it into 4 equal pieces, you can see why it would be an eighth relatively straightforwardly. And yes, again, the procedure for that is easy and straightforward. And we wouldn't want to, have to have children drawing everything out every time just to solve a question like that. But I do think if you've got the conceptual understanding of it, then you know whether the answer that you arrive at, having followed the procedure, you know whether the answer that you've arrived at is a reasonable answer or not, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, John. I think conceptual understanding, yeah, you may rely on tricks to remember certain algorithms or formula, but understanding what you're doing is really key, isn't it, to being able to use it effectively.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with tricks and procedures, and some children do just need those because for whatever reason, developmentally, cognitively, or just at age and stage, they're not quite ready for that conceptual understanding yet. And so anything that can help them feel confident about it is good, I think. But for the majority of pupils, I think aiming for that conceptual understanding is really important. And if they're not ready for that conceptual understanding yet, I wonder why we're teaching it at that stage. And I don't want to come back to analog time again, but I will if you force me to. But because we all know that I have a bit of an issue with teaching analog time in year 1. But that's for every other podcast episode, Becky. We'll leave that there. So there's my little thought of the day on fractions. Really, I think some people have already taught it this year. Other people will be teaching it in the spring term. I think anything that we can do to demystify fractions and help children to realise that actually they're just, they follow the same rules of addition, subtraction, multiplication as every other number does, and it's anything that we can do to make it a little bit more concrete and a little bit less abstract, I think is really worthwhile. Don't just rely on those procedures. I'll say that again, edit, because for some reason I mangled that word. Don't just rely on procedures. So, Becky, just before we move on to the takeaways from the episode with Mike Gardner this week, did you see in the news last week this this article? There was certainly one on the BBC. I'm sure other places covered it as well, about AI being used. Even this idea of deepfake teachers being used alongside remote staff to deliver maths lessons to schools.
Yeah, I did, and I have really mixed feelings about it. I'm not sure which side of the or even if there is a fence that you can go on to sides. AI is so massive, isn't it? AI could be invaluable in lots of ways, and we're specifically talking about what they're calling deep fake teachers. And I'm not sure. I think the job of a teacher is so much more than just delivering information, and I'm not sure you can get that if you're not in the
No,
room.
I completely agree. Even the idea of the remote teachers, we all know, well, many of us know our experience of teaching during lockdown, and doing so remotely was not ideal. Let's just say,
No,
it was the best of a bad situation, but I think so many teachers did a brilliant job during lockdown of keeping children engaged in learning and things. But it was hard. It was really, really hard, and the limitations of working remotely in that way became apparent very, very quickly. Um, so this school that we're talking about here, it's, in Lancashire, called well, it's not just one school, but the school that's in the report is in Lancashire. It's the Valley Leadership Academy. They hired a virtual maths teacher to just teach the top sets, apparently, of years 9, 10, and 11. And the remote maths teacher is based 300 miles away in Devon. So I think the issue here was that they didn't have enough specialist maths teachers locally to the school in Lancashire, which you can understand. That is difficult, isn't it? And I suppose away from the AI side of things, is it better to have a non-specialist teacher teaching this top set, or a specialist teacher who isn't in the classroom with them? Um, the
yeah, I think you have to find a solution for that problem, and maybe this was the best or is the best solution. I just think once you start introducing things like this, it's very hard to put it back in the box, isn't it? And yeah,
I think what I can say is that I can see the good intention behind it.
yeah,
Um, I'm not sure how I would feel, because I know we're saying these are top set children, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all confident mathematicians, as we know. And it doesn't all necessarily mean that they're confident in themselves generally outside of maths. And I'm sure there was another adult in the room with them. I can't believe that they were just sat in front of a screen. Um, but I'm not sure what a remote teacher, even a specialist remote teacher, would be able to do better than a physical teacher in the classroom. They're not able to walk around the room, are they? They're not able to look at work. I suppose you could have digital systems that give feedback and things like that. But what I keep coming back to, and this is the same with the AI thing, we've said it so many times, Becky, of all the interviews that we've done, the one recurring feature of really good, high quality teaching is the relationship between the teacher and the students. And we're not talking about being friends and mates and that sort of thing, but we're talking about actually really knowing the children, and having the pupils trust you, and being able to build their confidence and support them. I think in a way that this just doesn't allow you to do. And just my sort of final thought on this is, again, in the interviews, I occasionally think back to what my primary school learning was like. And it was very independent. It was me going up to get a card from a box, working through that card, going up, showing the teacher, then marking it, and me sitting back down. That did not work for me. It really didn't work for me. and I can't really see how this is going to be anything much different, really, in
No.
terms of not having that teacher support in the classroom. I think it's I'm I'm very much in favour of embracing technology. I think there's wonderful things that technology can do in the classrooms. We see it all the time. Again, just speaking to Mike Gardner last week about the way that the Maritime Academy in London and Nightingale Primary particularly use brilliant technology to really support the teachers and the pupils in the class. I just think this is a worrying, potentially worrying uh, move towards something that's less than ideal.
Yeah, I think relationships are key, aren't they? They really are to teaching and learning, but also behaviour management, which I can't understand how that can happen remotely. And unfortunately, it is an issue in classrooms that needs to be addressed. And I just think I can't remember who it was you were talking to who was talking about the power of not always teaching from the front. And I think often we're not teaching from the front of the classroom now. You could be teaching from a child's desk. You could be using visualizers to put things on the screen. It feels like would be much harder to teach reactively if you're not in the room with the children. I'm the same as you, fully embrace technological changes to support teaching and learning. I'm just not sure about this particular solution.
No, all of which, again, though, goes back to what do you do when you don't have enough specialist maths teachers coming through? And, we know how difficult it is to work in schools generally. And if you have got a background in maths, potentially the opportunities are, much broader than teaching. So, yeah, very, very difficult, I would suggest. And I'm not blaming the school particularly in any way here. That I'm sure they are trying to do the very best thing for their students that they can, and this is what they've hit upon. We're not in that school, Becky. We don't know exactly what's happening in that situation.
Yeah,
So
it'll be
this is not.
interesting. Sorry, John. It'd be interesting. So in the report, they spoken to some of the teachers and the head teacher, but it'd be interesting to hear what the children maybe thought about it. I know that's secondary as well, so it's a bit outside of our normal remit, but
Yeah.
interesting to hear how they're getting on with it and what their thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure this is something. This is not the last time that we'll be dealing with this, is it? So it'll be interesting to see if in the future there's any guidance from the DFE or anything like that around the use of remote teachers or AI teaching. Um, I if I had to pick between the two, I guess the remote teacher would be preferable to an AI teacher. Um, but yeah, I don't think either of those things are ideal, and I would hate to see the human completely removed from the classroom, because I just think teaching is more than just imparting knowledge and showing skills. There's
Yeah,
everything else that goes along with it, isn't there? It's a huge job, increasingly so. And I think that AI has definitely got a place to play in supporting teachers. I, I just don't think it should ever be replacing them. Personal opinion there.
yeah, and I'm think I'm with you there, John. I mean, yeah, the job of a teacher is so much more than just delivering. And I mean, it also opens whole conversations around safeguarding, doesn't it? And the role in safeguarding as teachers. So, but you're right, this won't be the last time we talk about it. And I expect we'll see some more news articles in the new year.
No, no. I mean, yeah, safeguarding, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? Who do you make a disclosure to if you not anyway,
Yeah,
yes. So all sorts of things to consider there. And we are not necessarily the experts in that particular field, but I do think it's something interesting to be aware of. And so we will, share these things with you when we come across them and when we're made aware of them. We said that we would talk about Mike Gardner's interview from earlier this week. So we were really lucky to have Mike join us on Tuesday. And we did something a little bit different with that interview. We tried to sort of take a journey through a typical maths lesson and think about what oracy might look like at each stage of that lesson. So all the way from the reactivate at the start of the lesson, all the way through to the plenary or the exit ticket or whatever you want to call it at the end of the lesson. And I thought it was a really fascinating conversation. I thought it was very practical, and I was really pleased that Mike shared some um, particularly practical strategies actually that you could use in class straight away. What did you make of it, Becky?
Yeah, I really loved the format actually, John. I think sometimes it, listening for teachers listening, they maybe could feel that there are things that we're talking about that they are not able to do because of certain constraints within their schools or within their classrooms. But I loved that actually it wasn't totally related to any particular thing, and you could pick up bits of it. You could pick something from Mike's interview that you could say, oh yeah, I'll go and try that in my classroom. It would fit with whatever your scheme was or whatever your ethos was in school, I think. So I really liked that format. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
And we will try and do some more of those mixed in with the usual interview formats in the new year as well, just so that we can, we'd like to bring you a mix of practical things that you can do tomorrow, along with, also talking about the joy of maths and the joy of teaching and things as well. So were there any particular takeaways from that episode that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think earlier on in the episode, you were talking about the perception that a quiet classroom could be more focused one and therefore maybe more productive. And I think there probably still exists that perception among some school leaders and schools out there. And I think that's a really tricky one because I mean, when I used to observe teachers, I really loved that maths feel, the buzz of maths as you go in the classroom. And I think that's a really important thing in maths. But I don't know that everybody is on that same page with
Mm.
that. We talked before, didn't we, briefly about quiet corridors. It's not quite the same thing, but I feel like that could be a bit of a difficult one for teachers to navigate if the understanding at school is that actually there's nice focused, it's quiet and it's focused is
Yeah,
the way forward.
it can be a little bit subjective, can't it, as well? One teacher might walk into a classroom and see a classroom alive with the buzz of maths, as you say, Becky. Another teacher might walk in and feel that this is chaotic and I couldn't possibly concentrate in there. And there's definitely a line, isn't there, between, we don't want children
Yes.
running around the classroom, even if they are running to, fetch some Cuisinart rods or whatever. It's got to be purposeful. I think that's the word that Mike kept coming back to, and certainly that I would use. It's got to be purposeful. It's got to be intentional. And it's got to be on task, I suppose, really, if you want it to be effective talk.
Yeah. Because
Um,
yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? You could walk into a classroom, you could see little pockets of children discussing, but unless you're actually listening and observing closely, you don't actually know if they're discussing the maths at all. So I think you're right. It's that
yeah,
purposefulness. It's the purpose that's
purposefulness.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They could be talking about anything, couldn't they? They could be talking about the last episode of the Primary Maths podcast. And I hope they are. The other thing, of course, that Mike did say was that there is a place for a little bit of quiet time as well, and it doesn't have to be that every moment of the lesson is filled with talk, because at some point you do need to, as a pupil, try and internalize some of that talk and
Yeah.
apply it to what you're working on.
It's just about those different parts being planned for, isn't it? You want this at this point and you want that later on, and that's okay. It's all okay as long as there's a reason behind all of it. I loved the thinking aloud conversation, particularly reminding the children not to answer the questions because they do. When you're posing yourself a question, they're very quick to try to answer it for you. So that was good. But again, and I think we talk about this most episodes, it does again rely on teacher confidence, which we know in maths, particularly in primary, is something that is lacking, and teachers maybe don't always feel confident enough to do that external monologue
No,
confidently.
no, but do you know, just as the classroom should be a safe space for the pupils, it should be a safe space for the adults as well. And
Yeah,
I do get that, if this is an observed lesson, you've got two other teachers or adults or head teachers, whatever, stood at the back of the room, it doesn't feel like a safe space. But day to day in the classroom, it should do. And certainly, again, just with me teaching with the students yesterday, we were doing a formal written multiplication, long multiplication, if you like, 2-digit multiplier. And I I made an error on one of the calculations as I was doing it on the board. I didn't spot it immediately. Somebody pointed it out to me, and you know what? It was fine, and it's okay. You know, you are not supposed to be infallible, are you? And in fact, one of the one of the students then told a story about the fact that she taught an entire lesson upon a misconception that she had. And she realized at the end of it, oh no, I'm going to have to go back and unpick that. And actually, it turned into a really teachable moment because the children were struggling with it because there was an error. Um, and so to revisit that and unpick what that error was and why it had happened, and you know, and then everybody sort of understood and then moved forward with it. It's you can turn these things into opportunities, can't you? So I think if it's a safe space for the pupils, a safe space for the teacher, and yes, we want to think aloud correctly, but if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's not life or death here. We're not brain surgeons.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. Sometimes I think it feels like you're not allowed to make mistakes in teaching, but you know, you are. It's okay,
Yeah.
and
And
I would rather that than just, you know, never try anything.
yeah, and particularly in primary, you know, you have to be master of so many different subjects and knowing so many different approaches and things. You're not going to be perfect at all of those things,
No.
and that's okay. And I think it's a good lesson for children to learn that a teacher doesn't have all the answers all the time, and like you
My
say, can make
classes
great
always learnt
teaching
that very
points.
quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. If they learnt nothing else, that year with me, they learnt that their teacher is never, ever infallible.
Yeah,
And, you know, that's as it should be, I think.
definitely.
We're people.
Yeah. The final thing, which I think I picked up, was Mike talking about investing time into creating that effective talk partner. I've done lots of work previously on a certain approach, and really the first week of term was all about building that collaborative learning space and how you work together effectively as a partner, as well as identifying which partners maybe weren't the best mix. And on paper, you can think it's going to work beautifully. And then in the lesson, it really doesn't. And there could be certain children who could make perfect partners in some situations and not others. So it's just investing time and knowing that you're not going to get it right to start with. It's not going to be, you're not going to sit with all the data and make perfect partners at the very beginning. But it is worth investing time in because it can be really effective when you do get there.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, again, they're not set in stone, are they? If something was working and then it's not, because we are working with people, small people often, who, you know, their life changes very, very quickly, and playground politics changes very, very quickly as well. You know, it's okay to move things about and to try different things as well. But you're right, trying to find the best combination is really important. The other thing is, of course, we don't have to move children around every 3 weeks or whatever either. There is something to be gained, I always think, by having a slightly longer term uh, seating plan sometimes, in so much as you can allow them to build friendships and relationships and see how
Yeah.
things work as well. You know, I'm not saying they have to sit in the same place for the entire year or anything like that, but uh, you know, I don't think seating plans should ever be completely random, my own opinion, but I think if we're doing things intentionally, it's worth investing that time, as you say. And if you've got it right, why change it for the sake of changing it?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes things need a refresh, don't they? But I think while it's working, make the most of it,
Absolutely.
which might be a relevant point to anybody coming back in January thinking I've got to do a new seating plan. Maybe I've just taken one thing off your to-do list over the Christmas holidays. I hope so. I hope so. Just for one person out there, that'd be great. Well, Becky, as ever, time is getting away from us. I think that's probably just about enough for this episode. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, and again, if you have enjoyed today's show, please share it with a colleague, and a quick rating or a review does help other people find our podcast, and as mentioned before, is very much appreciated.
Yep. Keep sending in your Maths of Life festive editions, please, because we will be back next Tuesday on the Primary Maths podcast with a special Christmas show. But in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful last day at school, if you're at school, and otherwise, we will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.